By the time Steven Spielberg gets around to mounting his version of the Trump Tower scandal as a feature film, he won't present it as an all the president's men type thriller or a paranoid nightmare like The Manchurian Candidate. After assessing the cast of misfits, doofuses, opportunists, brigands, and foreign operators who operated inside the Donald Trump for President campaign and mooched their way into its periphery, Spielberg will have his screenwriters key on the madcap events of this week to produce a broad comedy that hits the notes of farce with a hammer. What else, I ask, can you do with the new finding that slices of Fusion GPS as research were sold not just to a Republican-funded website and the Hillary Clinton for President campaign and the Democratic National Committee that would be the other Fusion product, the notorious Steele dossier, but also offered to the Trump campaign? According to Reuters, the negative information that Russian lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya sought to lay on Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort at Trump Tower at that infamous June 9, 2016, meeting were unearthed by Fusion GPS in an unrelated, earlier investigation. In that investigation, Fusion GPS was working to undercut William Browder, the activist investor who was the target of a lawsuit filed by a Veselnitskaya client and who had prompted Congress to pass the Magnitsky Act, which imposes economic sanctions on Russian government officials and businessmen for human rights violations. Story continued below. Is your mind reeling as it attempts to digest that good? Because it gets squirrely and squirrely. Reuters reports that Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson met with Veselnitskaya about that Browder-related litigation before and after her meeting with Trump Jr., Kushner and Manafort, according to a source familiar with the matter. You can just imagine Spielberg beating his screenwriters with a riding crop, berating them to put more doors opening and slamming in the Trump Tower meeting scene. Simpson with Veselnitskaya, plotting. Veselnitskaya enlisting her fellow Russian influence peddlers, Rinat Akhmetshin and Irakli Kavaladze, to accompany her to Donald Jr.'s office. Big Rob Goldstone, who set up the meeting, bringing up the rear, and checking in on Facebook. Then the set piece, Veselnitskaya rambles on at the meeting to the befuddlement of Jr. and his associates as she talking about the Clinton Foundation, Russian adoptions, what, as her Russian pals chirped like myna birds to increase the confusion. Then, as they're shown the way out, they cavorted through Trump Tower like a living version of the Marx Brothers in room service, frantically trying to make the sale to Jr. as the door shuts. In the denouement, Veselnitskaya parleys with Simpson about the debacle and he helps her regroup. There are now so many moving parts to the Trump Tower scandal, so many zany characters, it makes a Rube Goldberg contraption look like a simple machine. As the TV Tropes website has it, farces lean heavily on double entendres, deceptions and misunderstandings. The Trump Tower scandal fills that bill several times over. Likewise, coincidences, or seeming coincidences, dominate. We've got that covered, too. Glenn Simpson's Fusion GPS or one of its research projects like the Steele dossier appears like clockwork whenever the slowing plot needs another turn. Farce is almost never leisurely paced. Breakneck is more apt to describe it, the site tells us. That's as good a description of the Trump Tower caper as you'll ever hear. Carter Page, whose double-talk testimony before the House Intelligence Committee reads like an absurdist drama, lent more farce contour to the scandal. Page frequently filibusters, goes on tangents, and works himself into a state of high dudgeon, Fox reported. He so absolutely and comically contradicted himself that he failed the Turing test. At one point, Carter sounds like a survivor of brain trauma as he floats a cloud of gibberish in response to the simple question of why he traveled to Budapest and whom he met with. Is he a spicy nutbar or just expert in avoiding questions, or maybe both if we can believe what we think Page is trying to say? He appears to be saying that the Trump campaign had more interactions with the Russians than it wants to officially acknowledge. He asked the Trump campaign for its okay to travel to Moscow and conveyed support from the deputy Russian prime minister. According to ABC News, Page's fellow Trump campaign clown, George Papadopoulos, says that he originally lied to the FBI about his many interactions with the Russians out of loyalty to the campaign because he didn't want to disturb its official line of no contact with the Russians. Meanwhile, Joseph Mifsud, the professor who connected Papadopoulos to the Russians and claimed to have had compromising material on Clinton, has vanished. CNN's attempts to track him down in Rome, where he teaches, have failed, adding additional mystery to the farce. The grinding wheel of special counsel Robert S. Mueller's investigation blasted sparks this week as it became a foregone conclusion that an indictment of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was forthcoming. Mueller appears to have an excess of evidence that Flynn lied to the FBI, engaged in money laundering, committed foreign lobbying infractions, and participated in an aborted plan to kidnap a Turkish dissident for repatriation to Turkey. This particular bit of alleged skullduggery was reportedly being negotiated in December, after Flynn had been designated as Trump's choice for NSA. Flynn, many have reported, may have already been indicted with the announcement of the charges postponed. Trump can claim with some marginal accuracy that the Paul Manafort indictment didn't concern him because so much of the events described in the charges took place before he entered the Trump orbit. But as The Atlantic's David A. Graham put it, a Flynn indictment would place the Mueller probe inside the White House and expose the president to a hailstorm of obstruction of justice questions. Remember, Trump asked FBI Director James Comey to lay off of Flynn, who was then under investigation. That creates two separate occasions on which Trump could potentially have obstructed justice, first by meddling in the FBI's probe into Flynn, then by firing Comey altogether, Graham wrote. The greatest of all farces, of course, is the bedroom farce, in which mixed signals about who wants to bonk whom build to a coitus interruptus climax of hilarity. Leaks from the House Intelligence Committee had Trump bodyguard Keith Schiller confirming, however tangentially, that part of the most sensational assertions of the Steele dossier might be true. That is, Schiller testified that Russian hosts made a lunchtime offer to send 5 women to Donald Trump's room during their 2013 Miss Universe pageant trip to Moscow. Trump laughed the pitch off, Schiller said. What's not known is whether the offer was consummated. Schiller left Trump after filling him in. Trump has repeatedly and emphatically denied the dossier allegations, specifically the ones about women. He hasn't used the word yet, but he continues to regard the congressional and special counsel investigations of him to be pure farce. On this score, he might finally be right. Don't send women or men to Schaefer. Politico@gmail.com. My email alerts deny everything. My Twitter feed hedges, but my RSS feed admits all. Jack Schaefer is Politico's senior media writer.